Et on a un invité journaliste aussi, alors je vais lui laisser présenter soi-même.
Bonjour, Louis d'Anvers, très heureux de vous voir nombreux.
Peut-être ce serait intéressant de les expliquer pour quelle publication vous travaillez aussi.
Focus Vif, qu'on trouve dans le Vif l'Express.
Als een kleine plug voor Focus BIFF, bekijk dat zeker en pik dat zeker op als jullie hier BIFF zijn elke dag. So I will start with maybe a presentation, I think. I was told that there would be a presentation to start off the masterclass. There you go.
I'm out.
You're never out.
But when a man with a past... Did he come here too?
Is this an obsession of yours?
Maybe. Meets a woman with a secret.
What do you want with me, Jimmy?
Did he ever tell you you were beautiful? Falling in love.
I was right about you.
We're so sure. Is a dangerous game to play. You do anything for me?
Anything.
Consider the good.
Leave her out.
No way.
C'est une présentation qu'il a fait pour le BIFFF. Hein? Dat was een presentatie speciaal voor het BIFFF. Ik ga de woord...
Et même vu d'ici et comme ça, c'était très bien. C'est très impressionnant.
Alors, je vais laisser les paroles aux journalistes et à Neil.
Okay, Mr. Jordan.
Hi.
Since we are at the BIFFF Fantastic Film Festival, of course we will concentrate firstly on your relationship with the genre. Could you tell us what was your first contacts with fantasy, with the fantastic? I mean, being a kid.
I think the first film I saw was a film called Them. Did you ever see it? A Warner Brothers movie about giant ants? Yeah, yeah. For some reason, my mother brought me to it. I don't know why.
Les monstres attaquent en France. In French, it was Les monstres attaquent.
Yeah, it was actually quite a good film. Actually, I mean, because I saw it again about 10 years ago. It was high production values, and it was like not a normal kind of kind of monster movie of the time. And I saw a lot of horror films when I was growing up, and but I think my interest in fantasy comes from the fact that I grew up in a rather superstitious and fantastic, rather fantasy-driven culture in Ireland in the 1950s. That's where it must come from. It was, for some reason, my parents used to tell me loads of ghost stories, and they used to like to terrify me. I think it must come from that, I think.
Still, I believe your father was a university professor and he didn't let you read comics.
Can you hear me? Yeah. He was a teacher. Yeah, a teacher. And then he got a job in a teacher training college, and he was doing a thesis on children's reading. So his room was his office was full of comics, but he wouldn't let me in there to read them.
How come?
He thought they were a bad influence on your development of language and all that sort of stuff, So.
The place in Ireland when you were born and then brought up, I mean, were they in the local culture? Were there supernatural elements, things that maybe could stay with you or open your mind?
Yeah, well, I was born in Sligo. I was born in a town called Ross's Point on the west coast, and we moved to Dublin when we were about 6 or 7. When I was about 6 or 7, but the whole place was full of ruins. I mean, it was a very depressed economic climate. It was after the Second World War, which they didn't partake in. There were these enormous castles everywhere that were just in ruins. There was a lot of folklore about specific places. There were wells that were reported to have magic properties. There were trees that were meant to, be haunted. There were fields that you were not meant to walk across, or you'd die. There was all this stuff, and there was all this strange superstition, but I think it's still there in some way, but it's a very Celtic kind of culture, and in the 1950s, I don't think it had changed since the 18th century, really, apart from the fact that there were a few modern bungalows around and people drove cars, So it was a very unchanging place. Now it's totally changed. Now it's totally modernized, and it's quite different. But I suppose it would be like growing up in a place in Europe in the 150 years ago, probably.
As a teenager, I mean, did you grow, among other things, reading some, authors like Poe or some, fantasy writers?
Yeah. I used to read Edgar Allan Poe. I used to read Sheridan Le Fanu. Oh, a beer. Look, wow. Not for me, thank you. And a whiskey. Ooh. I'll have a water. These guys are tough, aren't they? But I used to read Edgar Allan Poe. I used to read everything. That's the answer to it. I used to read everything I get my hands on. I was very, very a voracious reader, But I don't. The place seemed haunted. That's all I'd say. It seemed very haunted and very frightening.
you are both a filmmaker, but also a screenwriter and a writer. What was the first thing that you contemplated as something you could do? You know.
It was to write. It was. My mother was a painter, you know. My father was a teacher. But the thing that Irish people seemed to do if they didn't become a teacher or a civil servant or a bus driver or whatever was they became a writer, you know, like James Joyce and William Butler Yeats and Sean O'Casey. And I think because it was the cheapest thing to do, you know. I mean, I do think it's as simple as that. I mean, there was no great architecture in the country, and there was no real grand visual tradition. There was no cinema at all. They didn't make movies there. So the thing you could do that nobody could stop you doing, I suppose, was write, you know. And I started to write short stories, and I started to write various pieces of fiction around the age of 16 or 17. And then I went to university, and I studied English and history, and I came out, and there was no employment opportunities anywhere. And so I got various part-time jobs, but I always was writing, and I published a book of stories when I was about 24.
You've written novels, poetry, you often write your own scripts. How does that help you as a director?
Oh God, I don't know actually. I mean, I think if you want to direct movies, it's better to write them, you know. I think it's the simplest thing to do, to write your own scripts. For one thing, you don't have to hire anybody else to do it, you know, and you don't have to negotiate your way through anybody else's sensibility, you know. So, but I mean, I've always written short stories, and I've always written novels, and it seemed to me to be a natural thing. The thing is, when I was in Ireland writing fiction at the age of about 24, it seemed the most written about place in the world, you know, because Joyce had written about Dublin, and Yeats had written about the countryside, and everybody had written about every bloody thing you looked at, you know. But nobody seemed to have photographed the place. Nobody seemed to have made movies there, and that's one of the reasons why I started making films, you know.
Do you feel more comfortable directing your own scripts because it kind of keeps you in control? Or writing your own scripts when you know that you're gonna be filming them?
It's better to write your own scripts, but I also collaborate. Like Company of Wolves, I collaborated with Angela Carter, you know, and Interview the Vampire, I collaborated with Anne Rice, and the movie that's showing here, Byzantium, I collaborated with Maura Buffini, you know. So it's, I mean, I enjoy the collaborative aspect of filmmaking, but I can always write, you know, if I'm doing a script, and for example, the movie Byzantium, if I'm shooting it and some problem comes up, I can always rewrite the scene very quickly, and sometimes the writer gets really annoyed at that, you know. But I think it's for me, it's being a writer-director seemed just a natural thing to do, you know. But perhaps for other people, if they were a cinematographer, or if they came from editing, or they came from special effects, or they came from acting, it might be as natural a thing to do. But for me, it's just a natural thing to write and direct the scripts that I write.
There is something about your ways as a director and about your art on the screen, is that you are dealing with the supernatural or supernatural beings in a quite realistic way, and at the same time you are filming people from, you know, banal people from the street, you know, people who actually exist, very concrete, in a way which is very open to I would say the fairy tale or the poetry of being. I mean, there is that, you know, monsters, but realistic, everyday people, but in a magic way.
Well, that's very nice of you to say that. It is. Okay, what's that?
I think it's obvious watching
your
movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very...
Well, I mean, that's why I like the cinema, I think, because the act of photographing something can change everything. You know, you can photograph an actor and you can create an image out of them that they didn't know they had themselves, you know? And you look at a ordinary landscape, like the landscape, for example, the seaside by Hastings, you know, and it seems drab and it seems cold and it seems miserable, but you place the camera in a dramatic situation and you get the composition correctly, and you introduce somebody walking on that beach in a red costume, and suddenly it seems like you know, an image out of a dream or something like that. And that's why I've always been attracted to movies, and that's why I make them in a way, I think, you know, because. But a very strange thing is happening now, because everybody's images are everywhere. You know, they're like on your iPhone, they're on YouTube, they're on, you know, they're on your iPad, and the kind of sanctity of the image seems to have been degraded in some way, and in some way I can't quite explain. I mean, also to photograph something with a 35mm camera was quite a complicated thing to do, you know. You had to have the sprockets, and you have to load the film, and you have to load the film in the cans, and you have to lace it through the sprockets, and you have to. Then you hear the little whir, and the light is exposed to the lens. There was something magic about the whole process than that with just the alarming ease of digital photography that is everywhere. I mean, I could shoot a movie with my phone at present, you know what I mean? But the kind of uniqueness of the image seems to have been chipped away at quite a bit of late, you know. And to me, the very act of you know, placing a camera on an environment used to change the environment in some way. Probably the only way it changed it was that I only saw selected bits of it through what I photographed. Do you understand what I mean? But that there was a kind of a magic in that, and there was a kind of a aesthetic charge to it, you know, that seems to, when visual images are everywhere, it seems to have been lessened some way. You know?
Do you think there's a flip side to this devaluation of the image? For example, does it encourage you to be even more creative with the images you shoot?
It depends on what you mean by creative, doesn't it? Because you see some of the earliest, most naive films that were shot with cameras that were impossible to move, and the images seem kind of spooky and haunted in some way. But you see, like my boys have digital cameras, of course. I've got kids, you know, and they use all the all the various programs, you know, that kind of thing, and they can instantly change the color and the light balance, and they can, you know, they make something look arresting rather immediately, and they take a lot of fun. And it's great that they do that, actually. But it's to me, the attraction of movies was that they were so, I suppose, so kind of rare and difficult, you know, and difficult to actually achieve, and difficult to construct the image that you wanted out of them. But you know, I've been using the Alexa, the new digital camera lately, and it is a great tool. You know, and it's a different tool. It's very different from the Ariflex or the Panavision or Panaflex or whatever. You know, I mean, digital photography has other aesthetic qualities. I think we're just beginning to discover what they are, you know.
Quite early in your journey as a filmmaker, you got a chance to explore all the potential of the cinema as magical. I mean, with everything, you know, with art created with artifice. You know, Company of Wolves. You had this set, amazing thing in itself that I would like to comment a little on. It was your world to create, and something that is, well, not every filmmaker wishes or can get, you know, as a young filmmaker. How do you look back on that experience that was? Because again, it was realistic to us. I mean, we were living among them, but the whole set was artificial. I mean, it was an amazing place.
Well, it was. I mean, I was very naive when I started making films. You know, the first film I made was Angel, and it was about the sectarian killing in the north of Ireland. But I shot it without any political context whatsoever, and because it was about a musician, a saxophone player who got, you know, he kind of replaced the attraction that a saxophone had for him with the attraction for a weapon, a gun. I kind of shot it like a musical, you know, and I think it was because I knew so little, really. I'd never gone to film school, you know. I'd never had any training in the history of film. The only, or in the technique of film, the only education I really got was from John Borman, because I worked with him as a script writer and as a kind of a.
He was executive producer on
Angel. He was, yeah. When I came to make Company of Wolves, I wanted to go in totally a different direction from what I'd done in Angel. I wanted to make something that was totally fantastic and fantastical, and people couldn't quite understand why, and they couldn't understand the script that I'd written with Angela Carter. But I was lucky enough to meet a great designer, a guy called Anton Furst, and he understood the possibilities of what we were trying to do, and you know, and I was lucky enough to get a budget, and Stephen Woolley, my producer, managed to get enough money to build this extraordinary set in Shepperton Studios. And it was very unusual in British cinema because the instincts or the aesthetic of British cinema at the time was always realistic. You know, you think of Mike Leigh and Ken Loach, and you think of that great tradition of kind of dirty realism that comes out of England, you know, which is great. But there was not this this kind of extravagant theatrical sense of image making, you know, that it didn't seem to be part of British cinema.
Since the 50s, I mean, the Archers, Powell and
Pressburger, perhaps, yeah. Perhaps them, yeah, the Red Shoes.
Not since then.
Not since then, no. But it was. We hadn't. But then again, that was naivety, you know. I just kept saying, well, why not do this? And we need to build this forest. We can't go out and find a forest. We need to build it. And so it just happened. People said, okay, let's do it, you know.
Yesterday, during the Q&A, which took place in the same cinema room with Frank, who is in the audience, and Thierry, you told us that you've got two scripts lying on your shelf. One is a realistic one, yeah. One is a fantastical one. And that seems like something that just keeps creeping up in your career as well. You told us yesterday that you want to make the realistic one first, probably. And it seems to me that you're always kind of juggling both. For example, when you made the Brave one, that was squeezed in between two more, let's say fantastical movies. So do you like kind of moving from one to the other? Is there like a detox that has to go on, or?
No, it's there's a film I've been working on for quite a while. It's like kind of Scarface set in Ireland. I mean, I think you can divide my films up really to the ones that are a response to the country. I grew up in Ireland, and I made 3 political movies out of 3 movies about violence. I made Angel, The Crying Game, and Michael Collins, you know. And there's a film I've written. It's a very, very violent and nihilistic story set in Ireland at present. It's a kind of a crime drama, you know. And I probably will make that next. I've also written a ghost story which is set nowhere, you know. So, but I don't know. I don't know which one I'll make next, you know. But I would like to make both of them.
Does it kind of inspire you, or does it help you to switch back and forth between more realistic films and fantasy films? Is there a detoxification going on after you made something more fantastic?
No, I don't think so, because I think you can see everything at a metaphorical level, you know. I mean, basically, do you know a film by Visconti, Rocco and His Brothers, do you? Yeah, it's a beautiful movie, yeah. I mean, I make fantastical movies, but, you know, I love I love kind of great realism as well, you know, and I basically came up with this story some years ago because the boom and bust in Ireland seemed to me to deserve a great movie, and a very violent and angry movie, you know. And I asked a writer to, I came up with a short sketch of a story, and I asked the writer to kind of have a look at Rocco and his brothers, which nobody has seen. That was the second movie he made, was it? Was it? Yeah, yeah. Okay, it's a movie set in Milan. It's about a bunch of an immigrant family from Sicily who end up in the slums of Milan. And one of the brothers is a boxer, and the other brother is a criminal. Yeah.
Alain Delon. Alain Delon.
Alain Delon. Yeah. It's a very beautiful film, actually. And who was the actress in it? She was amazing.
Annie Girardot.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, so. I don't know why I'm saying this, but it's just I've got this movie I want to make, and it seems to me to express the wasteland that exists. Film that is a kind of an erotic ghost story, but they both attract me. But I mean, a realistic story can be a metaphor. You know, it's a kind of a crime drama that I've written that's like. It's a bit like Paul Mooney's Scarface, you know, as well. And that's a metaphor for a reality, which is the place I've come from. A ghost story that I've written is also a metaphor for a reality, which is, you know, about the kind of erotic things we all have inside us. You know, I mean, to me, they both are about realities and experiences that we have.
But even when you take on a realistic subject, often it ends up with some imaginary touches. I mean, when you do a film like Mona Lisa, for instance, do you know from the start that it will leave the audience with the impression of a sort of mythological, fairy tale-ish mood, or is it something that just happens because it's the way you look at things?
Oh, no. I wrote that specifically that way. With regard to Mona Lisa, it's often a case of me saying to a writer, because I hired David Leland to write the first draft of that script, and it's often a case of saying, no, that's not what I meant at all. You know, I meant something much more emotional than what you've written there. With regard to Mona Lisa, I just thought, okay, it's like the two ex-con, the two lowlifes. Why shouldn't they talk about? They kept talking about a novel they'd read by John Franklin Bardeen called The Deadly Percheron, you know, which is a piece of pulp fiction from the 40s. I just thought, well, why not have two guys going through this crime story talking about this novel that they couldn't quite understand, you know? And why not build these unrealistic things into it? But it's also, I did want it to be like this mythical search that Bob Hoskins imagined he should have. You know, he imagined himself as I don't know if you know the movie Mona Lisa, it's been a long time ago, but the central character played by Bob Hoskins, a character called George, who his job is to drive around a prostitute, and he's quite a racist, and the prostitute is black, so he's very humiliated by this experience. She asked him to help her to find this girl who's been lost in the streets of London and Brighton and places like that. And he imagines he's going to rescue her and restore her to like morality, like a knight in shining armor and stuff like that. So there is a kind of a fairy tale metaphor going on through the movie as well. Yeah, but that's what I wanted it to be, definitely. I wouldn't have wanted to make a film that was just a straightforward crime story. I don't know why.
There are two people who are crucial. I mean, one actor, one producer that you met very early. One is Stephen Ray, I mean, and he was an actor in a lot of your films. And the other one, you stopped working with him for a while, but again, you're working with him as a producer, it's Stephen Woolley. Could you elaborate a little about those two guys and the importance they took?
Sure, okay. Well, they're both called Stephen, for one thing. And Stephen Ray, I mean, I just began making movies with Stephen Ray, and he's a hugely intelligent actor. And first time I saw him was on the stage in Dublin, in Ireland, you know, and I thought this guy should be, he's a quality that doesn't seem to belong on the stage. It seems to need to belong on the screen in a way. And so I made the first movie, I made Angel with him. I cast him in Company of Wolves. When I wrote The Crying Game, he became a kind of a collaborator, you know, so I would write certain roles specifically for him, you know, and I think in a way as a director you're lucky if you have such a figure, because they become an alter ego, and they also become somebody that can read what you're doing and give you a response, you know, and perhaps sometimes tell you more than you know yourself about what you're trying to do. And Stephen Woolley obviously is a producer. He produced, we've produced about 12 movies. I used to produce about 12 of my films. I mean, he was incredibly important to me early on when I made Company Wolves and Mona Lisa. And then we made a movie called High Spirits, which was a disaster, for which I blamed him horribly. But then when I came to make The Crying Game, he was the only person in the world I thought who would perhaps, who would manage to finance a film like that, you know. And then when I'd made The Crying Game, I made a big Hollywood movie called Interview with the Vampire, you know, so we kind of went on a journey together. And I think that's what happens if you start to make movies. You go on a journey with collaborators. You know, you're all young and you get older together. Then you get tired of each other and then you come back, you work again.
Do you think it helps to forge a more personal bond with people you're gonna be collaborating with often, or do you think it's better to have like a professional distance between each other?
It depends on what they want, you know. I mean, I think it helps to have a very personal bond with collaborators because they can remind you about what you should be doing. Do you understand what I mean? Because we can all get lost and we can all get tired. And filmmaking is a very tiring business, you know. And it's very helpful to have somebody to say, look, that's just not good enough. That's not what you used to do. You know, you deserve better, or we deserve better from what we're trying to do here. You know, that kind of thing. And but then sometimes people can have different ambitions, you know. And sometimes you can end up doing something and you say, why am I doing this thing? And you're like, oh, it's because you asked me to do it. Okay. That can get a bit annoying.
It seems to me, whenever I'm at a Cannes Film Festival, for example, or at a content market, the films that get started up, not necessarily the films that get made, are the films that get started up after people meet each other and decide they like each other. Not necessarily after they decide the script is excellent or anything like that.
Maybe that's the truth, yeah. Maybe that's probably the wrong reason to make movies, I think, in a way, you know. You mean drunken conversations. Yeah. But it's... I think films should be about look, it's not easy to make films anymore. When I started making films, it used to be as natural as breathing. You know, it's not easy to make movies these days. I mean, you feel you're making something that nobody essentially seems to want, you know. Particularly it's hard to make independent movies. So there better be a reason for them existing, you know. There better be a reason for them to be there, because the journey and the effort of making them has become very, very difficult, and you don't get paid anymore.
When you went to Hollywood to shoot Interview with a Vampire, you had such a cast. I mean, it's one of the most prestigious cast of that time. I mean, even the kid became a star later on. I mean, Kirsten Dunst. I mean, what about that experience?
Well, I had been to Hollywood before, okay? So I made a movie called We're No Angels, which actually I rather liked, but it was a big studio thing, and I didn't write myself, and you know, there was a lot of interference in the final cut of the film, which made it a little bit much more vulgar than it should have been, but it wasn't a bad experience. But I knew what could happen to people, to you in Hollywood. So when I made The Crying Game, it became a big hit in America, and I was asked to make Interview with the Vampire. So I said to David Geffen, the guy who had been trying to make this book for 20 years, I said, look, I'll make it if you can guarantee to me I can make it like an independent movie. And he said he would. And it was extraordinarily lucky circumstance. I mean, I think what happens if you have one hit, they trust you in a way, and they leave you alone for a bit, you know, until you mess up again. Then they take your stuff away. But I mean, Interview with the Vampire was kind of cool. I mean, Tom Cruise. I cast Tom Cruise. I had cast Brad Pitt first, and Brad was. I think there was conversations about Daniel Day-Lewis or something playing Lestat when Brad had been cast and stuff like that. And when I cast Tom Cruise, everybody got upset with me, you know, including the writer, Anne Rice, and they said, look, she said, you've cast the biggest star in the world. Why? And there was a reason, because I thought he had that. First of all, he's quite a good actor, very good actor, actually. He was then. I think he still is. And he had this very controlling quality, you know, which I thought would be perfect for Lestat in a way. And you know, when the movie came out, Anne saw it and she said, "Yeah, you were right," and she publicly withdrew her opinion. But it was unique circumstances. We were allowed to make it, you know, freely. I was allowed to do exactly what I wanted. I went to Warner Brothers. Then was a real studio. You know, the guys who ran it were like old-fashioned studio heads, and it was kind of a hit. You know, it wasn't a huge hit, you know, but it was a considerable hit. I think it was internationally, it was a big success, and it was still a lovely movie. I mean, the faults, there are faults in the movie, but they are faults that are in the book, I think. You know, the narrative tends to repeat itself through the centuries and stuff like that, you know. But I just wanted to make the book, really. I wanted to judge the book, you know, and I couldn't change that.
What is interesting is that you are not a big vampire fan in the first place.
No. Well, I mean, I did grow up next door to Bram Stoker. You know, I used to cycle past his house. And I've read Dracula many times. I'm just not a big fan of the Hammer rather tongue-in-cheek thing that Tim Burton seems to like. For example, when he did Dark Shadows. And sorry, I don't mean to diss anybody, but I don't think Vincent Price is the best actor in the world. You know, he's a good actor, but I'm not a fan of the stupidity of them. You know, I love Murnau's Nosferatu. I love the Carl Dreyer movie, Vampire. I quite liked even the vampire movie that Werner Herzog made. He made a remake.
The remake of Nosferatu with Klaus Kinski.
Klaus Kinski, it was very good, yeah. And I've liked some vampire movies I've really loved, you know what I mean? But I'm just not a mad fan of them, yeah.
Do you think that's why you were attracted to Anne Rice's story in the first place? Because obviously she's one of the writers that reinvigorated the genre and kind of reinvented it. And also, did that have any effect on how you did Byzantium? Because Byzantium as well, it doesn't present a typical vampire like in the horror films.
Well, I mean, the reason I did interview the vampire was because I read her script first and then I read the book. And when I read the book, I thought, this is the most extraordinary reimagining. This is the most extraordinary kind of Gothic novel, really, since Dracula, you know? And by Gothic, I mean real Gothic, you know what I mean? That brings you into a world that is real and unreal, that brings issues of morality into question. And she reinvented everything to do with a vampire, you know? She made it sexy, she made it dangerous, she made it believable, in a way. I never believed in Count Dracula. You know, I do not drink wine and all that stuff. Do you really believe him? I never believed in...
No, I just can enjoy it, without believing.
No, I enjoy it, but I didn't believe in it. But when I read Lestat and Louis in New Orleans, I believed those people existed. I thought, this is really frightening.
There's a lot more suspension of disbelief going on.
Yeah, and they lived in a real culture that was so far enough away from us to believe, my God, perhaps this was the real history of slavery in New Orleans and, you know, the whole kind of Southern Gothic thing, you know. And I think also she brought an enormous amount of Catholic guilt into the character of Louis. And I think it pervades the first book. It's like you can smell it in a way, you know. I don't think the other books are as good, but the first one I thought was extraordinary. You know, and I thought I'd really love to make a film that was about this world and about those emotions.
And Byzantium is even more, you know, a vampire movie which is in the real world. I mean, basically, you could see it as a story of a teenager facing the problems a teenager faces, except she has more problems, having the mother she has. But I mean, what triggered your interest
in Byzantium?
Yeah.
It was very unexpected. Stephen Woolley sent me the script, and I had no idea what it was about. I didn't know anything about the play that it was based on. But when I read it, I thought there's so many elements familiar to me from my movies, from this script, that I just had to explore it further, you know. You know, it was about storytelling. It was about kind of, in a strange way, it was about fantasy worlds. It was about a young girl trying to grow up. It was about a mother and daughter. It was about an abandoned seaside town. And I mean, I do think stories like this should be frightening in a way. You know, they should present you with possibilities that are so real that they could actually happen to you. That's why I liked Kronos, that Guillermo del Toro movie, because when that man found that strange scarab thing, you know, he found it in a graveyard, brought it home. I could imagine that happening to somebody, you know, and your wife going, "You're changing. I don't know why you're changing. Why you've got these scabs all over your body and stuff." I don't know if he had a wife even, but I do remember the little thing that he put in his. And I think that's what horror movies should do in a way. You know, they should be so. That's I actually incidentally think that's why that found footage stuff has been so successful. You know what I mean? Because it gives you the feeling that this actually could happen in a suburban house in America or something like that.
As you said, Anne Rice did a great deal for setting the vampire mythos in a more believable world. I think the vampire role-playing game did a lot for that as well. With, they added a lot of political intrigue, clans. The vampire role-playing game. They added clans intrigue. There was a TV series, a new Fated TV series based on that one as well. And then you have the Twilight series and similar offshoots. How do you look at the teenage versions of this kind of genre?
Yeah, okay. Well, I think before you talk about Twilight, you have to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, don't you? Which I think is brilliant, actually.
Joss Whedon is God.
Okay, but I think it is good. But I haven't read the Twilight books. I saw the first Twilight movie with the Catherine, what's her name? Catherine Hardwicke, is it? Yeah. She's who is a really good director, I think. You know, it kind of reminded me of Pretty in Pink or something, which is a movie I also loved. You know those John Hughes movies about the prom and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, I thought, okay, there's no harm in it. You know, I don't know why people. Apparently, the subsequent movies have been terrible, have they? They've been really.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I haven't seen them. So, but I don't know. I think they should be a bit more sulphurous than that. These creatures, don't they? They should belong to our nightmares a bit more than they do in the Twilight film.
When we look at Byzantium, there are two aspects that I would like you to elaborate on. Sure, yeah. About the movie, but maybe also in a larger way, which we are two crucial things: locations, find the right place to shoot, and then casting, which is probably to a large extent directing. Could you elaborate about those, maybe at the light of what you did on this production?
Okay. Well, I mean, I read the script. It was set in a small seaside town. They walked into they wandered into a boarding house that the script didn't describe any particular atmosphere, but I could see a realistic, contemporary set of locations, and it's not so much the locations; it's more the ambiance, the feeling of what the whole story demands. And I could see then these rather extravagant 18th century vistas, you know, that were like a painting by what's his name, that German painter, Caspar David Friedrich or something, you know, yeah. And I could see this contrast was necessary to make the movie. You know, you needed a kind of dirty realism that you would have gotten out of a Mike Leigh film, perhaps, you know. And then you needed a huge kind of German romanticism feeling that you would have got perhaps out of Werner Herzog when he made those strange films in the 80s, you know. And I felt the movie needed those things to be a good film. And so I went down, I began to search around the southwest coast of England, and I said to myself, if I do not find the right location to make this film, I'm not going to make it, because if you think of Don't Look Now, you know Don't Look Now? I know Venice, it's impossible to photograph Venice badly, but though some people have managed it actually. But you know, it's like those canals are so creepy and haunted, and
certainly a frightening film.
That was a frightening
film. A great movie.
Yeah, a great film, and you can. So, and with regard to this, the film we're making, it was nothing as grand as Venice, but it really needed a place that would stay in your memory and that would kind of create a great sense of unease, really, you know. And I found this place called Hastings in England. It's just down from Brighton, and there was this amazing hotel with this amazing old lift, and there was a pier that had been burnt out, and there was this endless promenade underneath the main road and stuff like that. It just seemed to suit it, you know. And for the 18th century sections, I chose, I mean, in the original script, she had gone to somewhere like Turkey or Asia Minor, or she called it Asia Minor, but they'd gone to a hot place where this vampire thing happened to them, and for various reasons we couldn't go there, mainly money. And I said, look, why don't we try the west of Ireland, you know, why don't we try and reinvent the whole vampire legend and place it in somewhere ancient and pre-Christian or something like that, you know. So we came up with that west of Ireland stuff, which was great.
And what about the casting process? Also very crucial.
Well, you know, the casting, the truth is that when I read the script, Gemma Atherton had read it too, because Maura Buffini had written a movie called, directed by Stephen Frears, remind me. You know, a very pretty girl with big boobs. Tamara Drew, yeah, sorry. I thought she was very badly photographed in that, actually, Gemma, you know. But I think the writer, Maura, had shown Gemma the script, or Stephen Woolley had, or somebody like that, you know. So she read it, and I met her, and we agreed about it, and I thought she was extraordinary. You know, I'd seen the disappearance of Alice Creed, and I'd actually seen her in a what was that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, set in Persia?
Prince of Persia.
Did you see that film?
Yeah.
Yeah? I thought she was the best thing in it. She seemed to be the only one who got what the movie should be about. You know, everybody else was much too serious. And, you know, I thought she'd be wonderful in this role. And, of course, I knew Saoirse Ronan. I knew her work, and I knew her. I think I'd met her once or twice. And I thought she was perfect for the role. So I just cast the two of them then, you know.
How involved are you generally in the casting process? Do you use...
Oh, totally, yeah. You have to be. I mean, as a director, if you cast a film correctly, you've got very little to do, you know. I mean, because this film was cast, those two principal leads were cast correctly. As a director, I've got it seems I do almost nothing, you know what I mean? I just watch them do what they're doing, and I, you know, place the camera in the right position, and it's the end of my job in a way. I know it's not quite that, but it sometimes feels like that, you know. And if a film is cast wrongly, it's like, it can be a disaster. So, I mean, casting is absolutely crucial.
A lot of directors rely on script writers, never touch the script, rely on casting directors, never really take the opportunity to even watch the tapes. So would it be too far out of your comfort zone to ever try?
To try what? Try what, sorry?
To give that much of the preparation for a film out of your hands?
I don't know how you'd make a film if you didn't make sure the script was correct, or at least try to make sure the script was correct, you know. And if you didn't, I don't know how you make a film if you hadn't cast it right, or at least agreed that the actors could be good in the role, you know.
There is a partner in crime that we haven't talked about before, which is the director, who is the director of photography. I mean, and that's also a crucial choice. So you worked with several great directors of photography. Could you tell us about how you do choose one, and then how do you work with your director of photography? Do you work by references? I mean, is it different following who is in charge? I don't know.
It's of course it's different, you know. I mean, I've worked with Philippe Rousselot. I've worked with Chris Menges. I've worked with what's the mad Chinese guy? The guy who does Wong Kar-wai movies. What's his name? Chris Doyle. Christopher Doyle. And I've worked with the latest movie. I've worked with this guy Sean Bobbitt. I think what happens is directors of photography. I think it's the last of the medieval guilds. You know, it's the last of the kind of technocratic processes that people create mystery around. I mean, what they do is actually quite simple. It demands an enormous amount of artistry, you know what I mean? But where the artistry comes from is often hard to say, you know. And I mean, somebody like Chris Menges is incredibly inarticulate genius of photography, but he finds it so hard to articulate what he's looking for, yeah, that it's kind of extraordinary somehow. Philippe Rousselot is one of the most intelligent people you'd ever meet in the world, you know, and he's a master of the studio film mainly, I think, you know. I mean, Chris Menges responds much more to natural light, you know. He came up with Ken Loach and stuff like that. And I think there's two dangers with the cinematographer. One is that they can take over the process because they are the last of the medieval guilds, you know, they have this secret knowledge kind of thing. And exposure is not that difficult to work out, you know, and nor is the placement. But it's a huge art, it's a true art when you see it working correctly, you know what I mean? But the danger is they can take over the whole movie. And the other danger is that they can get set in the ways and they can get tired, you know? And what's happening now in photography, I think, is that a lot of cameramen, because we're seeing the end of, you know, negative film, we're seeing the end of the chemical process, and a lot of the great cinematographers are refusing to engage with the digital world at all. Like Philippe, for example, will never shoot a film digitally, he won't. And Menges, to his credit, will. You know, he did a movie with Stephen Daldry, which I thought was far too colourful and far too bright for Chris, knowing his work, you know. But it was called Incredibly Loud or something, incredibly close. Yeah. And I've just been working with, I found this great cameraman, Sean Bobbitt, who will probably do my next film, you know. And Sean shot Hunger and Shame for Steve McQueen. And this film is the first time he's worked with this digital image making process. And Sean feels he hasn't quite got it right in this movie, but I think what he's done is extraordinary. I think it's graphic, it's realistic, it's many things at the same time, you know. And I think the main thing you should demand of a cinematographer is that they will take the chances that you take as a director, you know, and they won't just get tired and old.
But there you have it again. You're talking about DOPs, and you mentioned their personality. So how important is it to have people on set who can articulate what they want, who can communicate, or at least people you know, or people who kind of are able to communicate it to you? Maybe not to everyone, but who are on the same level as far as the thought process goes.
No, I don't think it's important to have people who can communicate things with you on the set, because your job as a director is to do that. I think I don't care if the person with me has Tourette's syndrome, you know, or is cannot even speak, you know, or even has a personality disorder that will not allow them look you straight in the eye, as long as they care, you know, and as long as they really care about their specific piece of the art, you know. And I think you really do notice it when people care, you know, and there's a total difference between those who do care and those who don't. And it doesn't matter if they're articulate, you know, or if they've gone to the French lycée or they've gone to Oxford, you know. I mean, I think because we're talking about image and sound here, aren't we? We're not talking about like articulation of language, really. We're talking about creating an image.
But do you have to feel like you're thinking on a common level?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But to do that, you don't also have to talk about it, you know. You know, when you're working with people, you do achieve a shorthand, you know, and you know exactly where the camera, what you want to achieve without having to have a big discussion about it. That's the way I find it, you know. I mean, some of the most interesting cameramen I've worked with have been totally inarticulate people, you know, and have not been able to express at all what they can express through the camera, which is the reason they use a camera, I think.
What about the editing process? I mean, is it still part of the writing process, as some filmmakers are saying about it?
Yeah, it is, but you have to be very careful. I've worked with the same editor for 20 years. His name is Tony Lawson. You know, nobody cuts Stanley Kubrick's movies, but he was the editor on Barry Lyndon and on some Sam Peckinpah films. He's not that old. It sounds like he's very old, but he's been doing it for a long time. So he's cut all of my movies since Michael Collins, and I do send him a script before I shoot it, you know, before I decide to make a film, and ask for his opinion. But sometimes he's very, very wrong, you know. An editor tends to read a script with, obviously with an editorial eye, and they tend to read the script as if trying to see the end product through it. They sometimes can miss the possibilities and things, you know what I mean, because they're always dealing with the finished product, you know, and refining the finished product. So they can sometimes miss what things could become, you know. And but I think an editor actually is the best collaborator a director can have, because for one thing you spend most time with them. You know, the shooting will take 6 to 14 weeks perhaps, but you could be editing for 6 months in the same room with this person. And for another thing, you have to rely upon them to do all of the post-production processes, the sound, the grading, and all that sort of stuff, you know. It's kind of, and you need somebody to help you there because it gets so tiring.
And what about music? Is it something important to you? I mean, do you sometimes, well, or sometimes the absence of music at certain moment? I mean, is it something that you think about, you know, ahead? Do you sometimes use music on a set?
Yeah, no, never. No,
like
play music? No, I don't.
No,
never.
okay.
I mean, I tried to do that once, but it failed miserably, and I parted company with the composer. He was a very dear friend of mine. I asked him. I won't not go into it, but it was. I think when I start something, I begin to listen to bits of music, and I begin to hear a score, and sometimes I write references to music into the script, like in The Crying Game. That song I wrote into those scenes where she sang it, and it's you know, for example, if I do this ghost story I've written, I know, oh, there's a song I'm using, yeah, I want to use. It's a Billie Holiday song called Gloomy Sunday. I want to use that, yeah. But I know it'll probably be mainly score, you know. If I do the Irish movie, I'm thinking it probably will be a lot of source music, you know, or kind of a very eclectic score. And thank you, thanks very much. But, you know, if you look at Dog Day Afternoon, have you seen it recently? There's not one piece of music from start to finish, and it's so refreshing to see a movie without music, my God, because it's everywhere these days, isn't it, you know? So, I mean, silence is as interesting as music sometimes, I think.
So how do you decide to use a score, to use a soundtrack, to use a composer for certain scenes?
You just want somebody that you will collaborate with. And you want somebody, again, it's like a cinematographer. The composer for this movie is Javier Navarrete, who is Spaniard. He's from Barcelona. He lives in Barcelona. And he composed the music for Pan's Labyrinth, which is a beautiful score. And he is somebody who does all of the work himself, you know. What I can't stand is the kind of composer who uses orchestrators and uses, you know, you feel you're not getting their best work, really, if they use teams of people or programs to orchestrate for the orchestra and stuff like that, you know. I mean, when I want a composer, I want somebody who will, you know, give me their heart and soul, really, you know.
You mentioned several of Guillermo del Toro's films. He's someone who likes to have a lot of control over his projects as well, who's involved every step of the way. So, were you able to do that from the get-go when you started making films? Was it easy to make sure that you were able to oversee the entire film, or was it something that evolved when people got more respect for you as a filmmaker?
No, when I started making films, because I started making small European-style films, it was kind of demanded of you. It was expected of you. It was, you know, when I made Angel, it was expected that the entire movie would be, you know, cut by me. It would reflect everything I wanted. When I made The Company of Wolves and Mona Lisa, similarly. What I found really difficult was when I began to make bigger films, and I had two quite bad experiences making. I made a movie called High Spirits in America, which was kind of taken out of my hands. And what's very difficult to learn is how to control a movie where you're not fully in control. That's a difficult thing. And if you do a Hollywood movie, that's the situation you will find yourself in, no matter whether you have final cut or not. You know, if you're not Steven Spielberg, you know, and because if you spend $70 or $100 million of studio's money, they will preview it, you know, and they will want to make it responsive to the lowest common denominator, you know, and they will have certain expectations.
But in Hollywood, I mean, final cut is something that very, very few directors, you mentioned Spielberg is one of them, could see from, not from a distance, you know. Even Scorsese, he told me once that there are many, many films on which he didn't have anything even close to final cut, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Martin Scorsese?
Even him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know, he mentioned Spielberg. Well, he has it all.
But I think it's a term that's gone out of use, really. I don't think people even use it anymore, because even if you have it, I mean, I technically have it, you know, if I did, like, for example, when I did that movie, The Brave One, I shared it with Joel Silver. whatever that means.
Joel Silver, yeah.
I know, but he was fine. He left me to do it. He didn't left me on my own. But it's the difficult thing to know is to learn how to make your own film through a large, expensive system, you know, and that's what's hard to know. But at the moment, I'm not interested in making Hollywood movies, because the kind of movies they make, I wouldn't want to make anyway. You know, I don't really want to do, you know, the Avengers 2. I'm not interested in the comic strip stuff that much. Maybe I should be, but I'm not.
That's because
Your
you weren't able
father
to read
warned
them.
you.
Oh, he warned me.
He warned you.
Do you think not having final cut disadvantages people working for Hollywood, directors working for Hollywood, disadvantages Hollywood films?
No, I don't. I think the final cut is a term that belongs to the 70s. You know, I don't think directors ever had it in the great Hollywood period. I don't know if Raoul Walsh ever had final cut, or if John Huston ever had final cut, or Howard Hawks had final cut. I mean, the directors used to shoot their movies and walk away, used they? And
Yes, but at the time, people like Huston and certainly John Ford, I mean, they only shot.
what they wanted.
Yeah,
what
so
they wanted.
it couldn't be edited in another way,
Yeah,
because
they
they
got
didn't
clever.
cover themselves the way a studio would.
No, I know. So they would get clever.
Cut in camera.
Yeah, and that's, if I do a studio movie, that's what I do. You shoot it in a way that cannot be cut in any other way. You know what I mean? But but I think the term, the magisterial auteur, you know, that we all kind of grew up with, the Andre Bazin figure and all that, is like, I'm not sure if that concept exists anymore, really. You know, apart from, you know, apart from an independent cinema where nobody's. No, of course you have final cut, because perhaps nobody even wants to see your movie, you know.
Let's involve the audience for a moment. Are there any questions from the audience?
We
There you
sh-
have one.
yeah.
Oh,
Yep. And when I was 13 or 14, my mom told me Tom Cruise was losing weight to be Lestat. And that's how you got me into the vampire genre. So I noticed one of the things that you had in Byzantium was the thumb claw and no fangs. And was that concept carried over from Interview with Lestat's thumb claw? And where did that originally come from?
Okay, that's interesting, because I always find the most cringe-making part of a vampire movie is when they expose their teeth, yeah? Except for, was it Max Schreck? Who's the actor who in Nosferatu?
Max Schreck.
Yeah. He had the teeth in the middle like a rat. They came down like that. And that, to me, was really scary, like a rat or a snake or some kind of snake, you know? But these, where the eye teeth grow, it just always seemed to me so cornball-y, you know? And when we were doing Interview with the Vampire, they had teeth, you know? He grew these vampire teeth. Of course, it was in the script. They needed to do that. But I remember saying, look, to Tom Cruise particularly, I don't want you to be all the time having to be going and biting people's neck and all that sort of stuff. So I had them design this little thumb thing, like a guitar pick, really.
Like a thimble.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a thimble. It was more like a guitar pick, but
Okay.
it was very kind of inlaid, and they designed it really carefully. So my idea was Tom would use this when he couldn't be bothered to use his teeth, you know. And it's when we started this movie, in the script, Maura Buffini, she'd written these vampires, when they wanted to kill somebody for some reason, she didn't want teeth either apparently, but they used to take out some kind of knife or something, and I said, Maura, let's just have them grow their thumbnail.
Like the Ankh and the Hunger, when David Bowie, they had an Ankh that they pulled out a blade, and that's how they would...
Oh, that's where she got that from. Thank you for reminding me that. Probably. But I just thought, okay, let's have these women grow a nail. It'll be a sexual thing, almost like a female version of an erection or something like that, you know.
Wasn't that the same thing in Interview when Tom's teeth got big? Instead of going like a switchblade, they kind of just got a big, erection.
Well, kind of, but not quite. I mean, come on, and then they had to be teeth still, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I prefer vampires with claws rather than teeth myself, you know.
Well, they should have both, so you can pull them close and get them in.
Okay.
Since Interview, I've been a professional fangsmith. I actually make teeth around the world, and those teeth in Interview were a big thing in the 90s. And I met Kirsten and Anne Rice at the Memnock Ball in New Orleans. And it was a really, really amazing thing because I actually had one of the thumb claws made by a jeweler.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I've got one of them at home, yeah.
Oh, you do?
I do, yeah.
Ooh, I would love to see one.
Okay.
Do you
I'll
guys
have
actually
I have the
use
original.
those?
What?
Do you actually use those?
No. But,
I would hope
fangs are a good sex toy, just like, but those fangs in Interview, the particular ones that you did, was that your idea with the triple sets?
Oh, we did, of course. I forget now.
Those were the best fangs I've ever seen in any movie.
Yeah,
I hate the standard classics.
The ones on either side grew a little bit, didn't they, as well?
There were the molars, the incisors, and the canines.
Okay.
And they kind of look like a serrated blade.
Yeah. You know your stuff, God.
Well, I watched your movie about 40 times.
Okay. We did all these tests on the fangs and all that sort of stuff, you know, but... God, sorry, you're bringing me back to another film now.
Because I saw the whole special effects thing at Cinefex.
You did? Okay. And what's his name? The great effects guy. What was his name? Stan Winston, yeah, who's now no longer with us, sadly.
Yeah.
Was Stan there, was he?
He was in the article.
Okay. You know, I mean, the main thing I got that I was quite proud of, actually, in Interview with the Vampire was that I wanted their veins to show like...
The blue translucent.
Like baby veins, you know?
Ooh.
And... we used to suspend the actors upside down before they... And the makeup people would... Because if you hang upside down, you know, your veins protrude. So the makeup...
Like gravity boots?
Pardon?
Use gravity boots?
No, we'd put them on a chair, and the chair would go back like that, like a kind of a barber's chair. You know?
It's more low tech.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and as the veins... So if you're lying that way for about 10 minutes, your veins begin to show. And the makeup people then would trace the veins, you know. So it had this extraordinarily delicate effect, like looking at an eggshell or looking at a baby's face or the top of a baby's head or something.
My team and I, from our fan clients, started running a party called The Endless Night, and we did it in Berlin, Prague, New Orleans every Halloween. We're actually bigger than Anne Rice's party now. And we're doing Paris in 2 weeks, and it's really amazing to see all the diversities of vampire imagery that come in. And people travel around the world, and your movie Interview with the Vampire was basically the foundation for this event. And
okay, I must go.
Well, I'll give you a flyer after the event.
Okay.
And the really amazing thing is Interview with the Vampire, in my opinion, after Lost Boys, because Lost Boys, like your Klaus Kinski, when you were talking about the rat teeth, you know, being a professional fangsmith is what we call our profession. We see all these different types of teeth. And now's the era of no fangs, you know, no Twilight fangs and the cheesy fangs they have in True Blood. But what was really amazing was how you added another dimension with Stan Winston to those fangs, because each actor and each character had a different type of fang. Like,
well, we basically cast their teeth. You know, we had dental technicians and all that sort of stuff, and they'd cast their teeth and they developed the teeth as to how they should look for every actor, you know.
Exactly,
because we had to show them growing as well. So that was, you know, with the early use of digital kind of image.
That was all digital?
Yeah, the growing, yeah.
Because one thing that I noticed was with Kirsten Dunst.
Well, it wasn't digital, no. I mean, we do a before and after thing, you know, and they kind of blend. What's the word they used to use? They'd morph from one to the other.
It was kind of like in the Michael Jackson videos, where they would morph.
No. With basically, the open mouth, you shoot the open mouth, and then you put the teeth in and shoot the open mouth again, and the effects people would you just morph that aspect of the teeth.
Because your vision of fangs and the way that you did interview is, I'm in agreement with you on the way that vampires should be portrayed. This whole Twilight and, you know, this new version is just confusing me to hell.
Okay,
we can talk about thanks later on. Let's give someone else a
much.
chance to ask some other questions as well. But those were some interesting questions. I know you'll get your chance afterwards as well. Any more questions? There you go.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hello. So I thought what you said about the loss of value of image in this culture was very astute and correct. And I've heard cinematographers say the same thing to me. And I'm curious whether you've consciously changed your approach to filmmaking or even writing, knowing or having this feeling that images are not worth quite what they used to be.
I don't know is the answer to that, really. You know, I mean, the sad thing about making, even turning on the camera nowadays, is that nobody believes what they see. You know, like for example, that waterfall in this movie that we did, we actually dyed that waterfall red, and everybody who sees it thinks it's a digital effect, and so you go, oh, that's really disappointing. There's no point in doing anything anymore because, you know, I mean, you look at something and say, oh, okay, they just did it digitally. Or whatever, you know, whereas, so that means, by implication, that means people don't believe in the image they're seeing anymore, you know, and I remember in the 70s and 80s when they were even developing, for example, you know, the beginning of prosthetics and, you know, great work with prosthetics, when, for example, you saw John Hurt in The Elephant Man, you know, my heart kind of stopped. My God, how does he look like that? What's happened to the human being? It's got this, and you don't know how that thing was. Now you just assume it's it's just a digital thing, you know, and it's. But I hope I don't do things differently, you know. I hope not. I would love to make a movie actually with a tiny little camera, you know. I'd love to make a movie with my phone. I would love to.
Yesterday during the Q&A, you also told us the only way to do it is to actually have visual effects on set and not use digital all the time. So, is it frustrating for you to see this digital revolution, and also how do you think actual visual effects on set have an added value as opposed to digital effects?
Yeah, okay. Well, because if you can photograph something, if a real event happens in front of your eyes, it has its own geometry, you know. I mean, the one thing that digital image making can never work out is the geometric, multidimensional way that a cloth moves or a wave moves or something like that, you know. Except everything you say about digital imaging, then you see a movie that disproves you. When I saw Life of Pi, I just couldn't work out how they made those waves and how they made those skyscapes, you know. But then again, it probably comes down to a director. It probably comes down to Ang Lee saying, I want the sky to be really dark all the time, you know. But I just want to believe in an image, you know. And when I see something that I believe in, I'm taken away by it. For example, I did see Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar, which I loved, because I believed in every frame of that film. I don't know, it just convinced me, and it was totally digital, and it was three-dimensional. But anything I've seen in 3D since that, I haven't believed for 1 second, you know. So I think it all comes down to the imagination behind the camera.
This is not a question about technology, but we haven't spoken about it, and maybe it's important. I mean, it's a question for the man who created the board jazz. I mean, what is it to television work today that makes some people say that it's more interesting now than a lot of movies the American film industry is produced?
That's because you're free. That's because they hire people like me. I think it's there are a lot of frustrated talents in the United States at the moment. You know, there are a lot of directors who thought they would have, they thought, you know, they would have an industry that would enable them to grow and grow their imagination and do what they should be doing, which is making great movies, you know. And they've gone into cable television and they found this is an area where actually there is no censorship, there's no, you know, there are people that will just support, you know, raw talent, and sometimes there's nobody watching. Which
maybe the audience doesn't know, but you just directed 4 episodes of The Borgias, I believe.
No, you got to get it right here. I direct and write every episode of The Borgias, yeah. There's a French version of it which I haven't seen, which people get confused by. Yeah. So I do a movie called, I do a TV series for Showtime called The Borgias with Jeremy Irons, an actor. And I write them all and I direct 2 episodes of every season, and we've done 3 so far. We're about to finish it off with a 4th.
Any more questions?
Another question? Yes, I think.
Yes,
Please.
good afternoon. I noticed a clear reference to the Rocky Horror Picture Show in your Byzantium movie. The elevator scene when Clara is going down, and there is a close shot of her high heels, just like the scene with Frankenfurter. Was it intended or not?
No, it was
No?
not intended at all. Okay, that was one of the first images that came into my head. You know, I shot her high heels when we were shooting, when we were rehearsing. I have it on my phone actually. Yeah, I used my phone to take that shot. Not the shot that's in the film, but the shot that was a reference for the shot in the film.
Okay. But I think that every Rocky Horror fan will see the reference.
Okay, well, it wasn't intended.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Any more questions? Are there any aspiring directors or directors in the cinema hall?
Hi. Sorry for my English. In Byzantium, apart from being vampires, the 2 main characters have nothing in common. They don't look like each other. They don't have the same point of view on things. And yet they are mother and daughter. Why did you choose to establish such a difference between them?
I chose them because they were really good actors. I was a bit worried that they didn't look at all like each other. But sometimes mothers don't look like daughters, you know, sometimes they don't. And I mean, the thing that worried me most was the color of their eyes, actually. You know, I mean, Gemma's got these startling brown eyes, and Saoirse has these startling blue eyes. But there's nothing, I couldn't change the faces, man. Sorry about that. I like their acting.
Since this is a masterclass, do you have any suggestions for future directors on what's important about the profession, or what should they take heed of?
Oh God, it's hard to say. I want to see. There's a lot of interesting movies coming out at the moment, aren't there? You know, and there's a lot of interesting films coming out of Denmark, and Norway, and series and Scandinavia. It's really weird, isn't it? You know, because they're all kind of generic. They're all genre type movies. The kind of Ingmar Bergman movie seems to vanish from the world, and yet you get these great kind of ballsy Danish directors coming and doing stuff. Look, there's always something interesting happening in the cinema, you know. So, I mean, just make people's jaw drop. That's all I would say, you know, and make sure you do it well.
Other
There's a
questions?
question over there.
Hi, can you share with us some of the your wisdom from your experience as a filmmaker? How do you overcome obstacles?
You just have to get your head clear, you know, and you have to work out exactly what you want to do yourself. I mean, when you see films that are confused or that are badly realized, it's often because the directors don't know what they themselves want to do, you know. And it is amazing to see, in a strange way, often the first films of directors have far more clarity than their subsequent movies, you know, for some strange reason I can never work out. I think it's also because when people are younger, they take more chances, you know. I would also say it's kind of the amount of energy you need for making movies it's the energy of youth, you know. So I would say do as much as possible as you possibly can when you're young, because when you get older, people won't want to employ you anymore. Seriously, it is true. And you know, it's about youth, isn't it? Really, filmmaking. It's not about youth, but it embraces youth in a way. So, I really want to see much more films by young people. And by young people, I don't mean people who are 40 and over. I mean in their 20s, 30s. I haven't seen the Harmony Korean movie. Is that playing here at the moment, is it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Some of there's actually some really great Korean movies showing here at the BIFFF, but not that one. Do you really think there's like an age gap on directors? Because a lot of the big name directors are getting old and still making films, but...
Like who?
Like Clint Eastwood, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese,
Yeah, that's three.
Coppola.
Yeah, Francis Coppola's not making films. He hasn't for a long time.
No.
Brian De Palma's not making films, I mean, a lot of directors who are capable of making films don't make them anymore, David Lynch hasn't made a film for a long, long time. He seems to have gotten very disillusioned, And...
well, they're involved in other projects, and they have some projects coming up.
I think they have difficulty making their own movies. I know Brian has a tremendous difficulty in getting his films going, and it's like... also, sometimes directors just seem to lose heart, don't they? They seem to become anodyne, or they seem to become like everybody else. I don't know. They don't seem to want to please themselves anymore. But anyway, it's it should be the kind of art form that there are younger people just pushing the older people out of the way, shouldn't it? Really, and that's what I would like to see.
Would that also be an advice you would give to directors? Stay young at heart, keep your wonderment in the world, stay creative.
Yeah, I mean, people have to believe in cinema, don't they, to make sure it survives. I mean, I'm sure great cinema will survive the current, whatever the crisis that's going on at the moment, and I'm sure there will be a form that is different and as arresting as the thing that we all grew to love, But at the moment, it is in a state of crisis. It is shifting, and it seems that people do not know what they want out of a movie anymore. And it seems that sometimes filmmakers don't know what they want out of the films they're making.
Any more questions?
Yes, please.
Hello. I'd like to know a little more about the way you write your scripts. Is there a certain methodology? Do you have several projects you're working on at the same time, for instance?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, I do. I'll tell you what happened to me was I see this. Oh, you can't see. I've got a brace on my knee. I severed my ligament skiing. Yeah, and I've written 2 scripts since that happened. So I would recommend you all break your legs. Yeah, so you're stuck at a desk. You can't do anything and just write. Because it helped. Believe me, I literally wrote 2 scripts since February. Yeah, since his leg was broken. Our leg was busted.
And when you write your scripts, do you take the current economic situation in respect?
No, not at all. No. No, when I write a script, I mean, the thing is, I write all the time. I'm constantly writing something. So that's the way I grew up. So. It's hard I know great writers who spend years over a piece of work, you know what I mean? But if I'm going to write something, I will write it really quickly,
I guess the question was also about, do you take in account when writing what a scene would cost, for instance?
Oh, no.
Saying, well, that one would never make it, so...
No, not at all. No, I think you should write it as if there's no budget even imaginable. I think you should just write it for exactly what it is. There's always a way of realizing what you've written. There always is. Even on a small independent movie, like the film we've done, Byzantium. That should have been a big Hollywood movie, but we were able to make it. Just because the images demanded to be made.
But it does look much more expensive than it probably was.
Yeah, it looks more expensive. But that doesn't, I don't think it matters what things cost, I really don't, And some of the most artificially wonderful images have been created on tiny little movies, You've seen those movies of the Quayle brothers, have you? Those animation films, you know? I mean, you know, you can do amazing things with stop motion. You can do amazing things with, you know, with kind of kitchen sink effects. You can do amazing things with lighting, you know, and they don't have to be realistic things, you know. It's so I think when you write something, you shouldn't think at all what it will cost.
Does it help to have a lot of friends in the business, to have a good network? Because oftentimes people will do stuff for less money than they would normally cost, and it's still added in the official budget of the film. So oftentimes films seem a lot more expensive also officially budget-wise, because they include a lot of things that they've got for free.
I don't know if it helps to have friends. I don't know if it does.
Maybe it works both ways.
I think it helps to have an audience, you know. I think it helps to make sure you get an audience, and it helps to... I mean, I tend to be so busy that I don't do a lot of publicity and stuff like that, you know. But I do think publicity is very important, actually. Just it's a burdensome thing, but I think it's actually, you know, it's important that people do go to see your movies, you know, and so therefore it's important that you talk a lot about them. Therefore it's important that you cause a lot of noise in the press about them, you know, which I'm all the things which I'm not very good at. You know.
Last chance to ask a question, Frank.
Follow-up question on the writing process here, if I may. One of the things you seem to do often is to frame the story as being told by one of the characters in the story. You know, like Company of Wolves is like a nested structure of stories, and Interview with the Vampire, the title already gives it away. Why does this happen, and what effect are you after when you do that?
Okay, it's because I read too much Bertolt Brecht, you know. I like to make movies that are about the way one's imagination works, you know. And I like to make movies that are about storytelling. Even if I'm telling a story, I like there to be a story within the story that is about storytelling. Like even in the most realistic movie that I've made, for example, The Crying Game, in the middle of it he tells a story that actually was told by Orson Welles in a movie called Mr. Arcade, and that's not the reason I use the story. I use the story because it would illuminate what was going on in the film. But I do like, because I think that's a specifically Irish thing as well. If you're in Dublin, people, instead of saying, how are you, they say, what's the story, you know, say, and you go, okay. You don't say, well, you know, you tell them what happened to you during the day, or what you're about to do, that is the story, you know, kind of thing. So but I do like to do that, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to make this movie, because it was about, in the end, it was about storytelling, you know.
Before we wrap up the Q&A part of this masterclass, my last question. Let's say I'm going to the movies and there's a Neil Jordan film playing amongst all of the other ones. Why do I go and see the Neil Jordan film instead of any of the other ones? You said PR is important, so there you go.
I don't know. I really don't know. I'd love if you did go to see it instead of the other ones. I don't know. I mean, look, you know, it's just, I am not good at publicity. You know, I do not have a public persona. I also write novels, you know. I know it confuses people a lot. I know in the literary world, the people who read my books, some of them don't even know I make movies. The people who see my movies don't even know I write books. I'm not good at presenting a public image of myself. And if I came back in another life, I would learn that specific talent, you know. But the reason I hope you would go in to see my movie is because it will blow your mind in some way, or will, you know, it will do something to your image, the way you look at the world. That's the only reason to make movies, I think, in the end. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So you're gonna get photo opportunity now.